Brexit and the rise of the American threat towards the Iran deal, we've seen a real resurgence in the profile of France in the region of the Levant and the Gulf, at the expense of Britain and the United States. France perhaps is the only Western player that's been able to emerge with its reputation vaguely intact. Of course, it has its own issues, histories, baggage with colonialism, especially with regards to Lebanon, Syria, as well as the wider Levant, Eastern Mediterranean and Gulf. But in this video, we're going to take a deeper look at the effect that this rise of French prestige will have on UK's role and perception in the world, as well as Scotland's place and actions on the geopolitical frame. France's rise has had an effect on two fellow European travellers, not only on a UK wrapped up in its own navel-gazing courtesy of Brexit, struggling to deal with the fact that the US, not only in real hard fact but also in rhetoric, no longer sees it in terms of the special relationship as a special partner that it can enact the global mission of the Anglosphere as the bearer of liberty, liberal democracy and human rights around the world, underpinning what's known as the rules-based order, but also the effect that the rise of France in the region has had on German designs within the region, but also with regards to European leadership. It was perceived that with the rise of Germany economically, France, totally contained within itself, suffering huge amounts of debt, its own financial crisis, a national crisis over the issue of labour reform, would be too distracted to once again take on the mantle of leader of Europe, balancing off between the Anglosphere and the rest of the world, namely Russia, but also the non-European states. This has all changed, partly due to the lustre that the media has given to Emmanuel Macron, but also additionally in terms of Germany's role in shunning away from the recent decision by France, the UK and the US to engage in airstrikes on Syrian government airfields, but also in the UK, being so contained with Brexit, it means that there's only one European partner that has a history and a record of being, some would say assertive, others would say aggressive. And of course this comes with its own pitfalls. Because of France's colonial history, whether it's in the Eastern Mediterranean, right through to the Arab Peninsula and far out to the Far East and Indochina, it really means that the French need to be very careful about how they try and wedge themselves as the new, most crucial European partner for the Americans. The French have tried to position themselves as being able to gain on a military, economic and cultural level from everyone in the region. They have reasonable communications with the Iranians, but they also deal culturally, institutionally and militarily with the Saudis. This means that they are complicit both in terms of the Iranians and their actions in Syria, as well as human rights violations in the domestic sphere, but also in terms of what the Saudis are doing in Yemen with the constant bombing campaign. But also that means that the French are tied up in the ratcheting of tensions between regional players, whether that's Iran, Saudi Arabia, Qatar with the GCC crisis and tensions between the Arab states and the Sunni monarchies, but also the political dynamic in Lebanon, where Hezbollah looks set to win the next and upcoming elections. But you've also got Israel in Turkey, with France trying to juggle its role within the Western alliance, trying to save the Iran deal, the Iran nuclear deal, by which Trump was elected, saying that he would scrap it, seeing it as the worst deal possible. And so France finds itself in an awkward and almost impossible and disingenuous position of turning around to the Saudis and Americans and saying, yes, we must clamp down on Iranian missile tests, but then turning around to the Iranians and the other Europeans and saying that we must stop the Americans being too rash. The real problem with the French position when it comes to Iran's ballistic missile test program is that it ignores the context of the desire for proliferation of nuclear weapons and nuclear technology. We have to go back to the Iran-Iraq war for the reasons why Iran simply doesn't trust the word of the West, whether it be European partners or America. After all, the West helped Saddam bomb and rain down ordnance on Iranian cities. And so the Iranians, seeing how much the French, even with their words of parlance, give to the Saudis and to Kuwait and United Arab Emirates, the Iranians are always going to be cautious about the role that the French have to play in their so-called role of easing the Americans in their path of aggression. And Scotland's role? Well, Scotland has two examples now. It has the example of the Anglosphere, with the UK and the US, both declined and finding it increasingly difficult in dealing with the multipolar world. But it also has France. France going in a direction of trying to evenly deal with both Iranian interests and Saudi interests, trying to be in everyone's camp within the region, trying to reinsert itself in a colonial context with colonial baggage. Scotland has to shy away from both examples of the Francophone and the Anglophile way and focus more on the tactics, on the perspective, on the strategy of Nordic as well as the German position when it comes to the region. Dialogue, peace initiatives, cultural initiatives, these are the key to actually being seen as an honest broker in the region.